A 40-year marriage, and the day it all changed. Spending 4 decades with someone should feel like a triumph. After so many shared years, you'd expect the golden season of life to bring peace, laughter, and the joy of grandchildren. But fate, cruel and unpredictable, sometimes has other ideas. The man at the heart of this story had built his life with his wife over 40 long years. But one morning, she hit him with news so jarring, it shattered everything he believed to be true. His world crumbled. What would he do next? How could he possibly recover? Let's dive into this story. And while you do, my friend, if you're enjoying the journey, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more. It was a Tuesday that began like any other, but by nightfall, everything had changed. That morning, I woke to find the bed half empty. Debbie, my wife, was already gone. That struck me as odd. Typically, I'm the one who wakes up first since I have to clock in by 8 a.m., while Debbie enjoys a bit more rest, usually sleeping in until around 10. After my routine, showering, shaving, and dressing for the day, I headed downstairs to make our morning coffee. But to my surprise, the coffee was already brewing, and Debbie was sitting at the breakfast table, dressed and ready to go. She looked up and smiled at me. "Morning," she said warmly. "Good morning," I replied, still slightly puzzled. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, Debbie casually mentioned that she had an early meeting at work and would be back home around 5 so we could talk. That caught me off guard. Did I forget something? I asked, scanning my memory for a date or event I might have missed. She brushed off the question with a light smile and said, "No, it can wait. We'll talk later." She rinsed her mug, gave me a quick kiss goodbye, and walked out the door before I could press her any further. Before I take you deeper into this story, you need to understand who we are. My name is Tim Johnson. My wife, Debbie, and I have been married for over 40 years, most of our lives, really. We met in 2nd grade, became best friends, and by the time we hit 18, it was obvious we were meant to be together. Our relationship blossomed through our teen years, and we never looked back. We were each other's first and only love. I'd never kiss another woman, aside from a casual peck on the cheek from a friend, and I'm sure the same was true for Debbie. We both went to the same college, moved into a modest apartment, and worked part-time jobs to keep afloat. I had the help of the GI Bill, a lifeline for U.S. veterans, which covered much of my education. Debbie's parents pitched in for her tuition, making our early financial hurdles manageable. Starting a family while still in college wasn't easy, but with help from her parents, we managed. Now, our eldest daughter Terry is 37, married, and a successful family law attorney working out of state. Darcy, our middle child, is 35 and single, working as an assistant principal in Washington, D.C. Our youngest, Sydney, is 34 and married to a local police officer. She's a full-time mom to our 2 wonderful grandkids and pours her heart into raising them. We love our daughters deeply. They made us proud every step of the way. After college, I built a career as a risk analyst at a major insurance firm. Debbie, passionate about health and fitness, became a physical education teacher in a neighboring school district and eventually transitioned to part-time administrative work. Now, at 59, both Debbie and I are still in great shape. We lead active, healthy lives, and from the outside, everything probably looked just fine. But as I was about to learn, appearances can be deceiving. I've always enjoyed an active lifestyle. Golf, swimming, and hitting the gym at least 3 times a week are part of my regular routine. But even my commitment to staying fit seems modest compared to Debbie's. She's relentless. 5 days a week at the gym, and she runs nearly every single day, often clocking in impressive distances. To me, she's the most breathtaking woman I've ever laid eyes on. Even after 3 children and over 4 decades of marriage, her figure hasn't changed. She weighs exactly what she did the day we got married. And it's not just about numbers. In her youth, she was a knockout, the kind of beauty that made heads turn whenever she entered a room. That magnetic presence hasn't faded. She still draws glances from men half her age. Yet Debbie carries herself with elegance and quiet confidence. She never seeks attention, but somehow always commands it. There's a grace to her that I've admired since the very beginning. We often reflect on our life together, how fortunate we are to have built something so lasting and good, our version of the American dream. We say it often, we're thankful every single day. Now, unlike a lot of men, the phrase, honey, we need to talk, doesn't fill me with dread. I don't break into a sweat or brace for doom. In fact, I usually welcome it. Debbie and I have always communicated openly. We've had what we call live meetings ever since before the kids came along, conversations where we plan, dream, and figure things out together. But this time, she hadn't said anything about needing to talk. At work, I wasn't the least bit concerned about the supposed discussion that evening. My mind was still caught up in the memory of the previous night, intimate, passionate, unforgettable. After all these years, Debbie remained a fiery and confident lover. She was never shy about what she wanted, and always had a way of getting it. Even after 4 decades, we were still physically close, 3 times a week, at least. She once joked that changing partners would be too much hassle, and I believed her. She always reassured me that I was enough. Curious about her mysterious mood that morning, I decided to leave work early. I thought it'd be nice to pour myself a glass of my favorite single malt and unwind before she got home. But as I pulled into our driveway, my light curiosity turned to unease. Her car was already there. Stepping inside, I felt the shift in the air immediately. Debbie was seated at the kitchen table. A glass of wine was set before her. A tumbler of whiskey, mine, was placed in front of the chair I usually sat in. She was rubbing her knee, an old nervous habit I recognized from our younger days. Should I change first? I asked, half-heartedly, trying to keep things light. No, she said quietly. Let's talk now. I didn't argue. I took my seat. But as I settled in, a tightness gripped my chest. A sense of dread I couldn't shake. Something was wrong. When I met her eyes, I saw it, something unfamiliar. She looked anxious. Her voice shook as she began to speak, carefully, as if each word had been weighed in advance. Tim, there's something I've been thinking about for a long time, she said, her voice low and controlled. And I need to say it without being interrupted. Please, just let me finish before you respond. I need you to really hear me. Her words were measured. With every passing second, she seemed to gather more strength, like she was preparing for a storm she had no choice but to walk into. I'm asking you to stay calm. Don't turn this into something dramatic. Can you do that for me? I nodded slowly. My lips were sealed, my thoughts spinning. She gave a small sigh. I love you, Tim, more than anyone in the world. You've had my heart since high school. There's never been another man, ever. I sensed a shift coming. A terrible one. The pressure in my chest grew heavier. My breathing became shallow. My shoulder ached. And still, she spoke on, painting the picture of a future we'd always dreamed about, one where we grew old side by side, surrounded by great-grandchildren, traveling the world, hand in hand. But that dream was unraveling with every word. My shoulder pain crept down into my arm. My pulse pounded in my ears. Tim, she said, her voice soft but unwavering, this is important. Please listen carefully. I tried to respond, but my voice failed me. I just nodded, numb. I've been carrying this inside for months now. I can't ignore it anymore. I need to explore something. I need to date other men. Just for a while. Maybe 6 months. After that, I'll come back to you, and I'll love you even deeper than before. It felt like the floor vanished beneath me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came. The room started to fade around the edges. Light dimmed. My body felt heavy. A thick fog closed in. I fought to stay awake, but my eyelids wouldn't obey. Darkness took over. A rhythmic beeping echoed in my ears. My throat burned. I couldn't move. Where am I? What happened? Slowly, it registered. I was in a hospital bed, disoriented, alone. And then it hit me. I'm Tim Johnson. And somehow, my wife tried to kill me. But why? My mind scrambled to reconstruct the events, to find the missing pieces that led to this moment, this terrifying, unthinkable truth. A hazy memory lingered. Sitting at the kitchen table, Debbie speaking to me. But the more I tried to replay it, the clearer it became. That wasn't a conversation. It was something far more chilling. It was a warning, veiled as honesty. As my senses slowly returned, I noticed a soft voice beside me. A nurse stood at my bedside, her face kind and calm. "Welcome back, Mr. Johnson," she said gently. "I'm Nurse Smith. You're at Mercy Hospital. You suffered a major heart attack, a type we call the widowmaker. It's a miracle you pulled through. It's just after 3 a.m. The doctor will be by later this morning to explain more." I tried to respond, but my throat felt raw, too dry and sore to force out even a whisper. "Don't strain yourself," she added, placing a notepad and pen in my hand. "The ventilator left your throat irritated. Just right if you need anything." She informed me I had visitors waiting, my wife and daughters. A wave of discomfort surged through me. I quickly scribbled, "No visitors." She looked a bit taken aback. "Are you sure?" I nodded firmly, writing another note beneath the first. "Do not release any medical info to anyone." Though her expression hinted at concern, she nodded, understanding the seriousness in my tone. Then I paused, hesitated for a moment, and wrote something else. "Is there someone here who can help me with a do not resuscitate form?" Her eyebrows shot up slightly, but she kept her voice steady. "Your current condition isn't life-threatening anymore," she said softly. I responded immediately, underlining each word in frustration. I was serious. She placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "I'll make sure the day nurse knows your request," she assured me before stepping out of the room. As the door closed behind her, I lay back against the pillows, a sense of quiet resignation settling over me. I wasn't afraid of death. Not anymore. What was the point of fighting for life if the person you lived for had already decided to walk away? Odds were, knowing my luck, I'd survive just long enough to become a burden, to live out my days in some half-functioning state. I didn't want that. Not for me. Not for Debbie. Sleep refused to come. I lay awake for what felt like days, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with thoughts and strategies. I'd always told people I was a risk analyst for an insurance company, and while that was technically true, my real work was helping clients understand and manage the hidden dangers in their operations. I had a gift for seeing problems before they fully surfaced, and finding ways to deal with them. Now, I had to turn that skill inward. Debbie hadn't physically hurt me. I knew that, but her words, her declaration, they cut deeper than anything. It may not have been an actual weapon, but it left wounds all the same. Lying in that hospital bed, I started to formulate a plan. Not out of spite, not even revenge. I just needed clarity. I needed options. I've always been the kind of guy who talks to himself when thinking things through, and this time was no exception. My internal dialogue helped me slow things down, look at everything rationally. Was her delivery abrupt? Sure, but that was Debbie's nature, direct and to the point. That's never changed. The question was, how long had she been thinking about this? She said months. Had I really missed the signs? Were there subtle changes I ignored? Had she already crossed that line? I didn't want to believe it. And deep down, I didn't. Debbie wasn't the impulsive type. If she made a decision, it was calculated, thought out. She wouldn't throw something like this out there unless she had already resolved to follow through. She didn't say she wanted to see other men. She said she would. That distinction meant everything. This wasn't a discussion. It was an announcement. So what were my options? Option 1. Let her explore this phase and hope she'd come back to me, as promised. Option 2. Try to persuade her to stay, make her see how impossible it was for me to share the woman I loved. Option 3. End the marriage, walk away, and try to rebuild. Option 4. Give up entirely. Stop caring. Just let it all go. To be honest, the last one felt the easiest in that moment. I was worn down, heartbroken, and tired of trying to hold together something that clearly wasn't whole anymore. Eventually, I must have dozed off, because sunlight was pouring in through the hospital window when I next opened my eyes. The clock on the wall showed 11 a.m. Moments later, the doctor walked in with a clipboard in hand and a serious expression on his face. The cardiologist explained that I'd suffered a complete blockage in the left anterior descending artery, a heart attack so severe it's often called a widowmaker. Statistically, most people don't survive it. If Debbie hadn't called emergency services when she did, I wouldn't be lying in that bed. Even with his emphasis on how fortunate I was, I didn't feel lucky. Relief hadn't settled in. Gratitude hadn't arrived. All I felt was empty, I asked if intense stress could have contributed to the heart attack. He explained that while emotional turmoil might trigger an episode, the real culprit were long-standing issues, genetics, high cholesterol, and underlying heart disease that had likely gone undetected for years. My question wasn't casual curiosity. I was searching for something to blame, something to make sense of it all. I tried to explain what had happened between me and Debbie, as much as I could manage. He paused, then said, that explains the no visitors directive. He reassured me I'd be in the hospital for several more days and that rest was absolutely crucial. Thankfully, they were able to place a stent rather than perform open-heart surgery, so my recovery time should be shorter. As for your personal situation, he added gently, that's beyond my expertise, but I suggest speaking to a therapist. A lot of heart attack survivors, especially those dealing with emotional strain, end up battling depression too. And with that, he was gone. No goodbye, just on to the next patient. Doctors often trade comfort for efficiency. Shortly after, another doctor arrived, a hospitalist, who listed the medications I'd need for the next year. It was overwhelming, like being handed an inventory list from a small pharmacy. As soon as she left, a commotion in the hallway drew my attention. I could hear Debbie raising her voice, demanding to know why she couldn't see me. Apparently, she'd been told that I'd specifically declined visitors, and it didn't sit well with her. Security was called to de-escalate the situation and escort her out. For the first time since her bombshell, I felt something resembling peace. It may sound petty, but watching her be turned away, knowing she was on the outside now, it gave me a strange sense of control. A minor victory in a war I never wanted. Maybe the doctor gave me a sedative after all, or maybe the exhaustion finally caught up with me, because I ended up sleeping for more than a full day. When I woke again, it was dark outside. The soft glow of hospital monitors bathed the room, and Nurse Smith was standing quietly beside my bed. "I'm glad to see you awake," she said with a warm smile. I nodded and asked her to call me Tim. My voice was raspy, but functional. She smiled again and told me to call her Beth. She sat down, her tone gentler now. "I wanted to talk to you, Tim. I'm still respecting your no-visitor request, but I do need to talk to you about the DNR order." I took a deep breath. "Ignore it," I croaked. "I'm not ready to give up, not yet." I told her I'd eventually have to face Debbie, but not now, not like this. I needed time. Beth understood. She said she'd make sure my wife and daughters were asked to leave the room before I woke again, until I was ready. Then she asked something that hadn't crossed my mind yet, whether I might want to speak to my daughters first. And just like that, a new fear crept in. Had they known? Debbie was especially close with our daughter Darcy. They spoke often. Was it possible she'd shared her intentions before telling me? I doubted the girls knew beforehand, but after everything went down, maybe Debbie had filled them in. Either way, I realized Beth was right. It was time to talk to them. I agreed, and she promised to bring them in, one by one, to speak with me privately. I made it clear I still wasn't ready to see Debbie, and Beth respected that. To my surprise, my daughters arrived almost immediately. Beth had probably kept them in the nearby waiting room. I had thought I was prepared for the conversation, but as soon as I saw them, emotion hit hard. That evening, I spoke with each of them separately. I avoided any mention of their mother. Instead, I focused on how grateful I was to see them, how deeply I loved them. Tears welled in my eyes more than once. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I'd come to never having this moment again. During our talk, Sydney mentioned something unexpected, that Debbie had admitted feeling partially responsible for what had happened to me. She hadn't gone into details, but the implication was enough. I didn't press. Sydney seemed unsure what to make of it herself. Sydney also mentioned that Debbie had promised to meet with him the following day to explain everything. Both Terry and Darcy told me they were planning to take an extended leave from work to help support my recovery. The emotions hit me so hard that Beth eventually had to cut the visit short. Seeing my daughters brought something into sharp focus. No matter how things played out between Debbie and me, life would continue. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing about this would be. But it wouldn't end. The only real question left was what I planned to do about my marriage. Was it worth salvaging? Even if she took her words back, could I live with what she had already said and done? I realized I needed clarity before facing her again. Maybe my daughters could help me make sense of it all. If Sydney was right, and Debbie had admitted her role in triggering my heart attack, then their opinions might carry weight. Betrayal doesn't just fracture a relationship, it splinters the entire family. Then something unexpected happened. A joint decision from my wife and daughters that I would remain in our home, while Debbie would temporarily move in with Sydney's family. Terry and Darcy offered to alternate caregiving duties during my recovery. The doctors had told me I could expect a return to a normal routine within 6 months. That seemed reasonable enough. But during the first 2 weeks back at home, Debbie kept her distance. She didn't interact with me at all. I began to wonder if the girls had intervened. Maybe they told her to give me space. Or maybe she saw this separation as an opportunity to explore a new life. I didn't know. I wasn't ready to confront her directly either. So I turned to Darcy, hoping she might shed some light on her mother's thoughts. We met privately at the house. Darcy had always been close to her mother, and I suspected she knew more than she let on. As soon as we sat down, I got straight to the point. Darcy, how long have you known that your mom was thinking about seeing other men? She hesitated. We talked about it sort of casually, she said, eyes darting away. When, Darcy, I pressed. She sighed, voice barely above a whisper. A few months ago, maybe 3 or 4. I felt a jolt of anger rise in my chest, and I had to fight to stay calm. My voice wavered. I'm sorry I raised my voice. I appreciate you being honest. This hurts. I guess I never saw how unhappy your mom must have been with me. Darcy tried to justify it, saying her mom simply wanted to explore new experiences while she still had time. It doesn't change how she feels about you, she added. It won't change your relationship. You believe that? I asked, struggling to contain my disbelief. You really think her sleeping with other men wouldn't affect me, or us? She gave her life to this family. Dad, maybe now she just wants a little piece of it for herself. She's still young. 59 isn't old. And honestly, it's not unusual for women her age to be interested in younger men. Her words stunned me. I'd suspected Debbie wasn't seeking companionship, just physical encounters, but hearing it confirmed by my daughter hit differently. I had thought I was enough, that our love would be enough. Apparently, I was wrong. You think I should support her while she explores affairs, and then what? Come back to me as though nothing happened. Darcy hesitated. Not exactly, but maybe your love for her should allow some room for that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her, if I knew about it, it wouldn't have felt like betrayal. That's your argument. We went back and forth for several minutes, but it was clear we weren't going to reach any kind of resolution. Darcy believed what she believed. I ended the conversation before I said something I couldn't take back. She looked at me, almost childlike, and asked, "So, what now, Daddy?" I don't know, I admitted. But I do know I can't accept your mom seeing other men. That's not something I can pretend is normal. I knew Debbie would find out about the conversation soon enough. As we hugged goodbye, I silently wished Darcy one of two things, either to remain single or to be completely honest with any future partner about her views. My talk with Terry was a whole different experience. She walked into the room fired up. I can't believe she's doing this to us. I raised my hand gently. Terry, she's still your mother. She may be, but she's hurting all of us, not just you. When one person in the family cheats, it doesn't just affect the marriage. It hits everyone. I tried to keep things grounded. You're speaking about this as though it's already happened. She's already started seeing other men, Dad, Terry said bluntly. Maybe not physically yet, but she's definitely emotionally involved. And I'm pretty sure it started before your heart attack. In that moment, I felt a wedge drive deeper between me and Darcy. Their reactions were so different, it was hard not to feel torn. Was Debbie already in a relationship? Probably. And yet, she had still called for help when I collapsed. That contradiction confused me more than anything. Why save me if she was already halfway out the door? Terry and I kept talking. We even drifted into legal territory, divorce law in our state, which didn't require proof of fault. She suggested that if I wasn't emotionally ready to fully sever ties, I should at least consider legal separation. She also warned me, while Debbie couldn't stop a divorce, she could delay it. That intrigued me. I realized I needed to speak to a lawyer. Terry offered to get me some legal contacts the next day. Later that day, I had a quieter talk with Sydney. She'd clearly been crying, and her emotions were raw. She pleaded with me to let Debbie come home. I never kicked her out. I reminded her, this house is hers too. She's free to return if she wants. Then I asked her the question that had been nagging at me. Sydney, did your mother continue meeting with those men after I was hospitalized? I already knew the answer. I just needed to hear it aloud. Sydney gave me a silent nod, tears rolling freely down her cheeks. How often, Sid? I asked through choked sobs. She barely whispered, almost every night, Daddy. She went on to explain that she had tried to confront her mother about it, told her it was emotional betrayal, cheating, plain and simple. But Debbie had brushed it off, insisting it wasn't infidelity since nothing physical had happened. She also claimed she had been upfront with me about her intentions. I could only sit there, shaking my head in disbelief. Before Sydney left, I called Debbie. I let her know that I was feeling well enough and that she was welcome to return home whenever she wanted. I emphasized that she should do it soon. Sydney was emotionally unraveling, and continuing to stay with her could tip her over the edge. I didn't linger on Debbie's reply. My focus had already shifted to preparing for what I knew was coming. With Sydney's help, I knew she'd be out for lunch the following day, and I spent the rest of the evening organizing my notes, preparing myself mentally. Preparation is everything in any confrontation, and I treated this like a battle. But, as the saying goes, no plan survives the first strike. And that proved true. When Debbie came home, she didn't just enter, she stormed in like a force of nature. "Where are you?" she yelled, her voice echoing through the house. I looked up from the dining table, where I had neatly laid out all of my notes. My heart pounded as she locked eyes with me, but she didn't pause. No calm words, no space for dialogue. She launched straight into her declaration. "There will be no divorce," she announced, loud and unwavering. It's worth mentioning that Debbie, a high school teacher with a passion for American history, especially the Civil War, seemed to be channeling the spirit of a battlefield commander. It struck me later that she'd used a strategy reminiscent of Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain of the 20th Maine at Gettysburg, outnumbered, exhausted, and with few options left, he ordered a bold bayonet charge that turned the tide of battle. That's exactly what Debbie did. While I was expecting guilt or negotiation, she came at me with a surprise offensive, and like the Confederates on Little Round Top, I wasn't ready. I don't know exactly how it happened, but the next thing I knew, we were on the bed. The energy, the intensity, there was no room left for thoughts or resistance. Afterward, drained and dazed, I lay beside her, trying to catch my breath. She stood, started to gather her things, and casually mentioned that she'd return the next day to collect the rest so we could get back on track. As she walked toward the door, I managed to whisper, "Debbie, thank you for calling the ambulance." She paused, nodded, and said in a weary voice, "I did it because I care. We've been through a lot together." Then she urged me to rest. We had time to make up for, she said, and left the room. But I couldn't let her leave without saying one last thing. "Debbie," I called after her, "I need you to understand. If you sleep with someone else, our marriage is over." She stopped, glanced back at me with a faint, almost mischievous smile, and said, "We'll see." What followed over the next few months felt like stability on the surface, but beneath it was something new and unsettling. Our days looked ordinary enough, but she kept seeing other men. We never discussed my ultimatum again. It just hung there, unspoken. She didn't offer details, and I didn't ask. But I knew. She'd tell me she was going out and wouldn't be back until late, sometimes once, sometimes twice a week. She'd come home after midnight, sometimes looking worn out, her hair messy, her clothes creased. And still, I said nothing. She never returned home carrying the scent of someone else. After a shower, she would slide into bed and continue the ritual of seducing me, as though nothing in our lives had shifted. Eventually, I gave in. I told myself that if I were to leave this world soon, there were worse ways to go. Deep down, I was convinced she wasn't involved with anyone else. I believed it. At least that night, I did. But she came home even later than usual. It was well past midnight. I sat upright in bed, unable to sleep without her beside me. It wasn't fear for her safety that kept me awake. It was a weight of what I already suspected, the knowledge of what the night might confirm. Then I heard the sound, the garage door rising, the sharp echo of her heels on the kitchen floor, the familiar creak of each step as she climbed toward the bedroom. When she opened the door, our eyes met. In that silent moment, everything became clear. She didn't need to say a word, and she didn't. Instead, she turned away and mumbled, "It doesn't matter. This is temporary. It'll be over soon. Let's not talk about it." Then she shut the bathroom door behind her. As soon as I heard the water running, I slipped out of the room. I went to the guest bedroom and locked the door, then dragged the dresser in front of it, just to be sure. I didn't think she'd follow me. That wasn't her way. She assumed, as she always had, that I'd calm down and everything would fall back into place. And she was right. She didn't speak to me again that night. And I lay awake in the dark, my chest tight, my eyes wet with grief for a marriage that was slipping through my fingers. I spent the rest of the night quietly thinking about what would come next. In the following weeks, we resembled each other more in formality than affection, polite but distant, coexisting in a shared space. I noticed she still left the house from time to time, late at night, but I didn't ask questions. I no longer wanted the answers. I stayed in the guest room and usually fell asleep before she returned. Oddly enough, I found comfort in the planning. The sadness turned to focus. I felt the kind of clarity that had escaped me before. There was no self-pity, no sense of regret or guilt. I didn't beat myself up for not being more attentive or understanding. I didn't beg for forgiveness, nor did I try to take the blame for the emotional disconnect. From where I stood, marriage was a mutual agreement, and she was the one who broke it. She never brought her concerns to me. She never expressed dissatisfaction or opened the door for conversation. She made her decisions in isolation and chose to act without giving us the opportunity to work through it together. While I could understand a person's desire for self-discovery, for change, even for temptation, what I couldn't accept was a lack of transparency. She unilaterally chose a path that ended our relationship, and I understood why. In many Western marriages, women tend to hold more control over the emotional dynamics, and ours was no different. Looking back, I can admit that I was too passive. Throughout the years, I never once challenged her behavior, never told her when something felt wrong. I let her lead because her happiness mattered more to me than asserting my discomfort. Before we married, we had clearly discussed what fidelity meant to each of us. There were no gray areas, no room for confusion. I upheld that agreement without compromise. I never strayed, never even entertained the idea. She did, and it was a betrayal, not my failures, that unraveled us. So, just a few weeks after her first affair, I was mentally ready for the next confrontation. One evening, after she'd gone out again, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared countless meals as a family, waiting for her return. When she walked in, I looked her in the eyes and said, calmly but firmly, "Debbie, we need to talk." She brushed it off immediately. "Not now. I need a shower. I'm tired. Let's talk in the morning." But I didn't let it go this time. "No, we talk now. Please, sit down." Reluctantly, she dropped into the chair across from me, her arms folded, face tight with irritation. There was something nervous about her, something restless. Maybe she still carried the scent of someone else. I didn't care to notice. I slid an envelope across the table. "These are the divorce papers." I filed them on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "No, just listen. Months ago, you told me to sit quietly and hear you out without interrupting. I'm asking you for the same respect now." She leaned back in her chair, rolled her eyes, and said nothing. I went on. "Inside that envelope is everything you need. It includes my lawyer's contact info. Please sign and return them to his office within 3 days. If you don't, I'll have them delivered to you at work. I prefer to keep this private, but I'm not above handing them over in front of your admirers if that's what it takes. I didn't hire a PI. I haven't followed you. I have no photos or recordings. None of that matters to me. The law in this state doesn't require proof of wrongdoing. Assets are split evenly. The house is paid off. Our kids are grown. We'll settle the credit card debt and move on. She stared at me, unmoved. Are you finished? She asked coldly. I gave a short nod. Fine, she said, rising from her chair. But we're not getting divorced. I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed. Good night. And just like that, she walked away. The following morning, Debbie seemed eager to talk, and for the first time in months, she had prepared an elaborate breakfast for us. She appeared cheerful, a stark contrast to the tension that had hung between us for so long. As she set the table and noticed the shock on my face, she sat down calmly and gestured for me to join her. Everything felt surreal. I chose not to sit. I told her I would be eating elsewhere, then walked out the door. What she didn't know was that I had already rented an apartment near my office, and I had no intention of returning to our home, except to gather my belongings after the divorce was finalized. Maybe she cried quietly after I left, but I couldn't be certain. At that moment, I had made up my mind. I wouldn't engage in further conversations with her. Our communication would go through our lawyers, and I was determined to keep it that way. As expected, she refused to sign the divorce papers. I delivered the summons to her at her workplace. In response, she hired a lawyer and tried to obstruct the entire process. Despite attempts by both our daughter and me to reason with her, she remained stubborn. But in the end, her efforts were futile. The divorce went through as planned. 6 months later, we found ourselves in family court with our respective attorneys. I didn't pay much attention to the proceedings. I was just eager to get it over with. My lawyer had informed me that this would be the only official hearing I needed to attend. When the judge addressed my wife directly, I sat back and listened intently. The judge asked, "Mrs. Johnson, why don't you agree to grant the divorce petition as it stands? As far as property distribution goes, everything seems fair." Debbie, standing elegantly in front of the judge, responded smoothly. "Your Honor, a few months ago, in the midst of menopause, I made a terrible mistake that led to the end of our 41-year marriage. Feeling insecure and unattractive, I succumbed to the attention of younger men at work. I foolishly believed that my husband would understand and forgive a few innocent flirtations. When he found out, I was shocked. I thought he would be okay with it. But I see now that I was wrong." She paused before continuing. "After he served me the divorce papers, I cut off all contact and began therapy several times a week. My therapist helped me realize how wrong I was. Although I know I can't stop him from divorcing me, I hope we can try couples counseling to salvage our marriage. It's only fair that he agrees to joint therapy before we proceed with a divorce." Debbie finished, then sat down with an almost playful smile. For a brief moment, I thought the judge might be moved by her speech, perhaps even propose that we attempt to work things out. But that wasn't what I wanted. I looked at my lawyer, silently pleading for help. Then the judge turned to me. "Mr. Johnson, are you following along? What do you think about your wife's arguments?" My heart dropped as I realized the judge was suggesting that we might try to salvage our long-standing marriage. I muttered to myself, "Damn, I can't believe this is happening." Debbie seemed almost triumphant. My lawyer, meanwhile, furiously scribbled in a notebook. I knew I had to act. The battle had already started, and I was prepared to fight back. "Your Honor, may I take a moment to think over what my wife just said?" She made some compelling arguments that I need to discuss with my lawyer, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The judge responded kindly, "Of course, I think that would be wise." The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted, almost like a scene out of a Hallmark movie. I quickly turned to my lawyer and asked, "What happens if I withdraw the divorce petition right now? Could we arrange the counseling sessions in a new way?" My lawyer, who looked like a seasoned legal expert, turned to me with a firm expression. "If you withdraw the divorce petition now, the court will no longer have jurisdiction over the case. However, if you disappear, your wife can file for divorce again in a year, claiming abandonment." I couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I had some luck left on my side. I paused for a moment, considering the question before letting out a deep sigh. Is it necessary for me to continue living with my wife? Different possibilities swirled in my mind. "No, there's no requirement," came the lawyer's response, his tone professional and detached. Then a thought seemed to hit him. "But will I still get my payments?" "Absolutely," "Clarence," I assured him, offering a wide grin. I adjusted my tie, wiped my palms on my pants, and stood tall, ready to face the court. Everyone was anticipating a feel-good resolution, like something from a Hallmark movie, and I was prepared to give them exactly that. "Your Honor, after listening to my wife's heartfelt speech, I've decided to withdraw my divorce petition," I announced confidently. The courtroom buzzed, though it wasn't exactly chaos, just a few people lingering around during their lunch breaks. The judge banged his gavel, officially concluding the trial. Debbie and her lawyer were in tears, overwhelmed with joy. I, however, was seething inside, but I put on what I hoped was a convincing smile and walked out of the courtroom. Once outside, I made my way to the car, but Debbie followed me, rambling on about how happy we were, how everything would be okay now. I started the car and drove away, unsure of what had just happened. After leaving the parking lot, I threw my phone into the bushes, a symbolic gesture of cutting ties, and headed straight to Wake. There, I walked into the HR department and officially retired at 59 and a half. With $41,000 to secure my financial future and the knowledge that Social Security was still a few years away, I felt at ease. My assets were solid, and I could support myself moving forward. Following the divorce, I made a trip to the bank to settle our financial matters. Our house, fully paid off, was valued at nearly $1 million, and our other assets totaled about the same. I made the decision to transfer everything into my name, including refinancing the house in Debbie's name. Since my family had no idea where I was, only contacting me for work or by phone, I was able to execute my plan without interference. After scheduling a meeting with Debbie, I drove to the house that used to be ours, now likely Hayes, behind the wheel of my brand new 11-foot Georgetown motorhome. In the back seat was my Jeep Wrangler, ready for the road. I knocked on the door, and I heard Debbie and our 3 daughters approaching. I had warned them about my arrival, anticipating some tension, and I wanted them to look after their mother. "Darling, you're back. We've been so worried about you," they exclaimed, surrounding me. The daughters were already eyeing the motorhome, sensing that something was off. "I've come to say goodbye," I said gravely. "Goodbye? What do you mean? We'll always be together, won't we?" Debbie asked, her voice tinged with concern. "We've always been together, Deb," I assured her, "but I'm leaving for a while." "What about work, Tim?" she asked, confused. "I've retired," I replied. "I'm going to travel around the country, but I can't leave the school district just yet. School has already started." "I know traveling in a motorhome was our dream, but I can't do it right now," I added, though she still didn't understand. Her daughters, however, were stunned, their expressions filled with shock as they realized I was leaving them to deal with a wife who still didn't comprehend the gravity of the situation. "Debbie, we need to go inside and talk. I have a lot to tell you, and I want to hear your thoughts," I said, trying to keep the tone neutral. Reluctantly, we all gathered around a familiar kitchen table where so many family discussions had taken place. As I sat there, memories of the past flooded my mind, and the weight of the moment hit me. This could be our last conversation as a family. For the last few weeks, I had reflected on everything. The anger had faded. The anxiety and self-doubt had melted away. I finally felt a sense of peace, something I hadn't experienced in years. It was time to speak my truth. First of all, I owe you and the girls an apology. Debbie, I regret how I reacted when I found out about your affairs. I'll admit my behavior was childish. I began. I raised my hand to silence Debbie before she could respond. Please, let me finish. I know the heart attack wasn't your fault. In an odd twist of fate, your quick thinking may have saved my life. The paramedics confirmed this, so I'm genuinely grateful. That's something I've been reflecting on since the court session. I paused, collecting my thoughts. We've never really had independence, have we? We've been together since high school, and I understand now how you felt when you wanted more space. At first, I couldn't see it, but now I realize you just wanted privacy, the chance to live life on your own terms. The truth is, I feel the same way. I also need to live independently, outside of our relationship. I let her speak then, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. I'm scared of being alone, she said, sniffling. I swore we'd always be together, inseparable. Her voice wavered with emotion. I regret saying that. Please, Tim, don't leave me. You promised me you'd come back. I've already forgiven you. Deb, maybe one day I'll come back, but I'm releasing you from our marriage vows. I told her, my tone calm. I want you to be free, to live your life without guilt. I can't stay here while you continue down this path. How can I reach you? How can we talk? She asked, her face contorting with distress. You can't, I replied. I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back. Debbie covered her face with her hands and began crying uncontrollably. My daughters, though upset, remained quiet and composed. I apologized to them, assured them of my love, and urged them to take care of their mother. I gave them my email address, as I had no permanent phone number or address. After stepping out the door and leaving them in tears, I climbed into my motorhome and drove off, leaving behind the life I had known and starting a new chapter, free from the past. Over the next year, I stayed in touch with the girls. They informed me that Debbie's behavior had become erratic. She was trying to appear younger, wearing revealing outfits, and even flirting with men far younger than her. It seemed she was also making inappropriate advances towards our daughter's husband. In the end, Debbie was left lonely and bitter, still struggling to understand the consequences of her actions.